Welcome back. WNST. Tough way for a game to end. And I think we sit around here and prognosticate all week and talk about ways the Ravens can lose, the way they can win, what Drew Brees would be. Luke Jones, I don't know that we ever could pontificate or think, and Nostradamus thought that, well, it'll all end when Tucker misses an extra point at the end after Flacco rallies them to get them back into the game and John Brown catches a big touchdown pass. Just sort of an unthinkable ending that I think we're all sort of pinching ourselves a little bit and saying, what exactly was that?
Yeah, I think you really look at how this game started with the Saints having a 20-play drive that lasted over 10 minutes. They went for 4 different fourth downs, getting 3 of them, and they came away with 0 points. And then you bookend that, and that's very weird. I mean, that was as strange of a beginning of a football game as I've seen. Maybe some others in that category. I don't know if I've ever seen something stranger than that.
Well, a time of possession alone, right? I mean, it was just very awkward, if nothing else.
Well, I'm just talking about the start of the game. Just for a game to start that way and then to end in the fashion that it did, where the Ravens, the defense had held the Saints to 7 points in the first 3 quarters and then give up 17 over the final 3 possessions. And then you have the offense go 3 and out. They miss out on a 4th down on their next drive, and then they move down the field and they score what you think is going to be the game-tying touchdown, and you think that they're going to be going to overtime, and you don't even think about the possibility of Justin Tucker missing an extra point. To your point, it's something that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in his NFL career. It didn't happen to this guy in college. That's how great of a kicker he's been at every level, and we've seen this since the NFL moved the extra point back a couple years ago. We have seen good kickers around the league struggle and miss extra points, and even some miss some extra points in some really crucial spots.
And some other guys where it gets in their head. Literally, right? For good kickers for a week or two, we saw guys missing 2 a week a little bit and still maybe keeping their jobs, but, it is not automatic. It's not as automatic as he makes it look, and I probably have tweeted that 20 times over the last 10 years.
Yeah, but when it is so automatic for so long, it stuns you. I couldn't have been the only one who had thoughts of Billy Cundiff in the AFC Championship. The good news is the stakes weren't nearly as high this time around. The Ravens have plenty of football to play to atone for this, but it was shocking, and it really summed up, as I said to you in the press box at a couple of different points, just a really strange football game, an entertaining football game. Talking to players in the locker room, more than one said that it felt like a playoff game. I thought it was a pretty good atmosphere at the stadium. I think there was definitely a buzz to this one, even if maybe this one didn't get as much national attention as I thought it might, but it certainly lived up to it as far as how competitive it was, how dramatic it was, but it very much was very strange. And like I said, starting with that drive at the beginning and ending with Justin Tucker not making a game-tying extra point with just a handful of seconds to go.
Well, look, the Tucker thing will be the headline in all of this, but it really was sort of a heavyweight Flacco, Brees, offense, defense, trying to move the ball, big plays, big flags in a lot of cases, and some big players. In this case, their wide receiver, Michael Thomas, was not a mystery around here, and certainly we saw Jimmy Smith with the ice last week in Nashville and where it would be, and then Humphrey not in, the offensive line. The Ravens had some missing parts. It was a little awkward at various points, but, Brees is surgical, quite frankly, and had done enough to win the game once. And, to your point, didn't sort of close the door very much in the first half. Sort of left points out on the field a couple of times and came away with nothing. And if you're the Ravens, you feel like, well, that's exactly how you beat Drew Brees, because you knew there was going to be a counterpunch at some point. I think that offense is too good.
Yeah, and that's why, as much as people will look at how the defense gave up 17 points in their final 3 drives, and they gave up a couple second-half touchdowns after they hadn't done that all season, the reality is you're not going to stop a Drew Brees-led offense. You can slow it down, and the Ravens slowed it down for a long time. And I'll come back to this. If you had told me prior to the game that the Saints would finish with 24 points, I would have thought the Ravens would have had a great chance and should have won that football game then. I think, and on the flip side, the offense, they certainly didn't come up as big as you would have liked after New Orleans finally broke through and started scoring some points. They had the 2 dud drives where they netted nothing, and that really swung the game big time. But at the same time, the offense had 3 drives in the first half, and they scored 10 points. So that's not terrible. So it's really, it was, and this is where I keep going back to this being such a weird game that I can point to the offense doing good things at times and then being not so good, and also taking into account they were down 2 starting offensive linemen. I can look at the defense that held Drew Brees and the Saints to 7 points through 3 quarters, but they gave up 17 in the fourth quarter. And really, the 3rd and 8 from Brees to Michael Thomas with Tony Jefferson hanging all over Brees, I mean, that completely turned the game around. It was 17-7, and the Ravens were getting ready to force a punt if Jefferson's able to bring Brees down and Thomas isn't wide open streaking over the middle of the field. So
Brees has some like elusiveness, some sort of awareness that he never gets sort of broadsided blindly, and has an elusive nature. Look, I don't watch him play every week, right? Like, dude's going to the Hall of Fame. How much can you honestly say you've sat and watched Drew Brees' career? I know, I haven't. I only see it in a highlight reel, and I see it as sort of like indoor pinball and a little bit of a leftover thing from where Kurt Warner used to do in sort of its surgical nature. And, having watched it a little bit, and the Ravens did everything they could do to slow it down, to play their style of game, as I think Joe Flacco said even in the aftermath of the game. But Brees is, he punches every card for me. And sort of the notion that at the end of a game on the road in the cold that he was very capable, and they were very capable.
Yeah, he's one of the all-time best quarterbacks. He threw his 500th career touchdown on Sunday, and a couple weeks ago against Washington set the career all-time passing yardage record. So, he's a great quarterback. And this goes back to what I said as far as the end result, even though talking to Weddle, talking to Suggs, talking to Jimmy Smith, who really struggled on Sunday, talking to so many veteran members of this defense, they all said, yeah, we definitely needed to play better at the end than we did, but they also wanted to be sure to give Drew Brees his proper credit, and he deserves that proper credit. Anyone who thought the Ravens were going to hold the Saints to 7 or 10 points or 17 points, I think your expectations are too high. Just because this defense has played at an exceptionally high level.
Well, it looked good for a little while, right? It looked good for 3 quarters.
Yeah, but that's where I go back. I keep coming back to the offense. This game, you could feel the swing from the point that they converted the 3rd and 8. They scored the touchdown early in the fourth quarter to make it a 17-14 game. That was the point in time in which the offense needed to respond. And what happened? The offense went 3 and out, and they punted the ball back, and New Orleans went down the field and scored a touchdown, and they took the lead. And then the Ravens moved the ball, and then they had to, they couldn't convert on a 4th down, which, by the way, I agreed with doing that because it was getting very apparent that you couldn't necessarily count on your defense to make stops because I think they were tired, and I think New Orleans had finally gotten into an offensive rhythm. So I agreed with it. They just didn't convert. So I think this, for me, what this really comes down to, I don't really point to one specific phase and say it was really bad. The offense needed to be better. I absolutely feel that way because I don't think they played a particularly good defense on Sunday, especially passing defense. The Saints had come into this week ranked 30th in the NFL, and the metrics were bad and all of that. So I'll put a little more of it on the offense. The defense, certainly situationally in the fourth quarter, they didn't come up as big as they needed to. If they make one stop there rather than giving up 17 points, let's say instead of 2 touchdowns, it's another field goal instead of one of those touchdowns. That makes a big difference. And then Justin Tucker, as great as he is, as great as he's been for a long time, and as much as I won't write the guy off by any stretch of the imagination, situationally, you can't miss that extra point. And he knows that. I'm stating the obvious there, but I don't know. I look at this game and I don't think it's a bad loss because I think New Orleans is a really good football team, and I think I picked the Saints to go to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year for whatever my predictions that are always wrong end up being worth. But that said, I kind of come back to this theme that we've talked about the last couple years with the Ravens, and they're so far removed from being a playoff team. They're getting to be further removed from being a team that was in the AFC Championship and winning the Super Bowl, and it's not a knock.
Well, they're further removed from having a roster full of guys who've won games like that, right?
So for me, I kind of feel, is there a certain sense that this team needs to learn how to be really good again? I think they're good. They won at Pittsburgh 3 weeks ago and beat Ben Roethlisberger. That's something they hadn't done in a while.
Dude, it felt like they were good at halftime. Literally. It felt like they were good when Justin Tucker came out to hit the field goal and like, all right, we'll get to overtime, and I predicted a 27-23 victory. I would take 27-24, but, I mean, I had notions that that's the way it was going to go down. And because I've seen that movie before. I've seen the Ravens win these kind of games a lot, quite frankly, a lot during the Flacco era. But to your point, not a lot lately. Not a lot lately, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that timeline, I think they've gotten to the point again where they kind of need to learn how to win those kinds of big games consistently and to be not just good, but be really good. And I think that's a process, quite frankly. And I'm not, by no means should anyone write them off because of this game. But I'll say this, Nestor. I'm really interested to see how this team responds the next couple weeks because I've said since the beginning of the season, what did I say their target needed to be going into the bye week? 6-3. So that means they need to win the next couple. And if they don't, they're going to be hovering around 500. And, if they let down and they aren't ready to play against a pretty good Carolina team that's coming off of a big win, a comeback win on the road, and then they have the Steelers, then you're facing the prospects of being 4-5 at the bye week. So you can't let this snowball. You can't let this kind of define you and kind of have that here we go again mentality.
Well, the other thing is the Steeler game feels like 3 games because you beat them, you sort of exercise the demon and make them go away. You lose to them, you go pound sand for 2 weeks, get ready for the Bengals. And, oh, by the way, just by losing to them, you're letting them back. You're tightening this whole race up. And we have to think that the Bengals will bungle before it's all over with anyway. But the Steelers game specifically is one of those ones where, like, you didn't get this one. Now you got to get that one. You got to get that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of these games are important. 5-4 at the bye. I'm telling you, I'm not loving their chances to get back to the playoffs. Then it feels very 2017, 2016 like. They had an opportunity here against New Orleans on Sunday. They didn't get it done. Okay, well, you need to take care of business the next couple weeks. I don't think when you go into this stretch where it's New Orleans at home, at Carolina, home against Pittsburgh, if you want to be considered a legit contender, winning 2 out of 3 should be the expectation when 2 of those games are at home. And if you're not able to do it, well, you know what? You're back in this uphill climb scenario the second half of the season, having to either run the table or be near perfect. So, we'll see. Again, I don't think this doesn't crush their season or anything like that, but I want to see how they respond on a number of levels.
This is 2-3 too that they've lost like this, right? Like Cleveland and now this, where both of those games, I in the locker room afterwards, like it was sitting right there. I mean, it was just literally sitting right there. That's different than going out and getting your ass kicked, like maybe they did against Cincinnati, where they're down 3 touchdowns early and sort of clawed a little bit. But these are the games where when you start to add it up, you talk about the difference in the end between being one of those 7-5 teams or one of those nice cushy 9-3 teams. These are the ones that get away from you that, the rebound, to your point, is crucial in another road game where they're going to pack it in again next week.
Yeah, and again, I think you need to look. We always look at this week to week, but you take a step back and look at the big picture. And I want to see how they respond as an offense. I mean, let's face it, this is 2 out of 3 weeks now where the offense was really bad in Cleveland, and I'm very underwhelmed with how the offense played on Sunday. I mean, I would be sugarcoating it if I just said, okay, well, they scored the touchdown at the end, they could have tied the game. Well, the 2 previous drives are what took them from being up 10 to then in a position where they're down and needing to score a touchdown just to tie. So, it wasn't just the defense; it was also the offense being completely flat at the most crucial point, pivotal point of the game. So, I said a few weeks ago, I didn't think this offense was quite as great as it had looked in some of those really early games this season. I've said all along, my expectation has been for them to be, in the top half of the league, and I still think they're on track to be able to do that, but need a little more consistency than we saw Sunday against, to me, not a very good defense. And, certainly need to be better than they were a couple weeks ago against Cleveland, where they were pretty awful. So you're still chasing more consistency there. Want to see the defense bounce back. I mean, they're going to be going on the road against a Carolina offense, but hey, Cam Newton's a quarterback. You're talking about a guy that's been an MVP and has been to Pro Bowls and has that kind of reputation for being a really good quarterback. So you need to rebound. And I will say this, as much as anyone that's trying to crush Justin Tucker, and I think most Ravens fans have been really level-headed about that as much as you can be in that scenario, because they have seen how many kicks this guy has made.
Good grief. If you're not level-headed about this, I don't really want to hear from you. You know what I mean?
Sure. But I will say this. There have been lots of great, and you even made this point several minutes ago, there have been lots of great kickers that miss a kick, whether it's to lose a game, an extra point, something weird happens.
Yeah, I go back to like Steve Sachs not being able to throw the ball to first base.
Yeah.
Weird stuff happens, especially when you've never, ever, 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 ever gotten an A-. Right?
And that's the key right there. How does he deal with the failure? I think Justin Tucker will be fine. If I had to place a wager right now, I don't know if I'd bet my mortgage, because I don't know if I trust any kicker that much. But
they are kickers.
But I would place a wager that I think Justin Tucker will be fine. But we need to see him go out and do that, and it goes back to what you just mentioned, handling failure. Billy Cundiff is like the biggest example you think of, and even though a lot of that had to do with just the Ravens brought in a better kicker than him, he didn't really get a chance to have that redeeming moment at any point. But there have been plenty of kickers. I think of Blair Walsh a few years back for the Vikings. I mean, he had been a well-regarded kicker, and you saw how his career sputtered out. So I don't think that's happening with Justin Tucker. I want to be very clear about that. But you do want to see him respond. You want to see him make that next kick. You'd like to see him have a chance to hit a 55-yarder that maybe isn't at the last second for the Ravens, because you're hoping maybe doesn't come to that. But if he hits a 55-yarder in the second quarter in Charlotte next Sunday to give the Ravens a 10-3 lead,
and he will, right? I mean, come on,
you would think so. You would think so.
Sometime in the next 6 weeks, he's going to win a game. He's going to kick 3 52-yarders in a game. I think he's probably kicking the ball right now. Literally, he's one of the most obsessed, possessed sort of dudes, literally, sure. Right? And to see the guys and Sam and Morgan sort of circle around him, and even Flacco and John, and you and I have been there when they've given him the hard time because he is the kicker and all that stuff. There is a little bit of a brotherhood there, and I think we all in the media and fans realize he's the best at what he does in the world, and it is an outlier of all outliers. It's never, ever, ever happened before. So I don't know, man. You get a mulligan from me. I don't. Well, I'm not going to beat Justin Tucker or anybody up at this point.
I'm not beating him up, but I'm saying you need to see him rebound. You need to see him rebound. He needs to go do it, just in the same way that this football team needs to do it. The worst thing that can happen. The only thing worse than losing on Sunday to the Saints is going out there and laying an egg in Carolina next week, and all of a sudden you're 4-4, and you're facing the prospects of needing to beat the Steelers to avoid having a losing record at the bye week, which is the exact territory they've been in the last 2 years. So don't let this thing snowball on every level. If you don't let it snowball and you bounce back and you beat Carolina, I think you're fine again. And I think you're still feeling really good about where this team is, but they need to go out and do it. And until they kick it off next Sunday afternoon, there's going to be at least that little hint of doubt, and Justin Tucker is going to be more eager than anyone to get back out there and attempt his next kick and make his next kick. But tough and certainly a shock, and I think that was the overwhelming sense in the locker room. Plenty of support expressed for him, as there should be. But definitely a shock. And, again, you had a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter, even though New Orleans was driving at that point. But definitely one that the Ravens had to feel they let get away. And, it's a shame because I think that was a good football team, really good football team that they played on Sunday that they had a good chance to beat if they made a couple more plays in the fourth quarter.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. The coffee's still 99 cents. At some point, they're going to give me the chicken outfit, and I'll wear it. And Justin will still be singing the coffee song. So here's to Justin. We'll kick him straight next week in Charlotte, as we just said. And all of our WNST coverage also brought to you by our friends. We have new partners. I want to read out all of our new partners. Give them some love here as we're getting up on Halloween. Strategic Factory. You saw them inside the Ravens game on Sunday, up on the big boards. Marketing, printing, promotional goods of all kinds, all in one shop in Owings Mills. Let them help you promote your business. You'll look great doing it. If you need signage, printing, branded apparel, logo designs, giveaways for a trade show, stuff that has your name on it, you need them at 443-738-9830 or see them at strategicfactory.com/WNST. Buffalo Wild Wings up at Bel Air. World Series getting going this week up at the festival. Go see them up there. They have a $5 menu on game days at the Buffalo Wild Wings at the festival in Bel Air. Make your life easier and just order online. If you're up in the Bel Air area, you can take it home with you. It is Buffalo Wild Wings. Tell Joe we said hello. We'll get back up there and see them soon. Big new sponsorship here. I'm going to be doing a weekly segment with a couple of really cool docs at LifeBridge and their Health and Sports Medicine Institute in Owings Mills. If you're familiar with Foundry Row, if you have sports medicine needs, your kid's an athlete, you're a weekend warrior, my elbow's been bothering me, don't ask. You need Dr. Kevin Crutchfield. He's the concussion and head-related injury specialist there. We're going to have some great chats with him, as well as Dr. Craig Bennett. He does the orthopedics. Got to get my elbow better. I'm going to be seeing him. The new game plan for sports-related injuries. You've seen Cal Ripken around town with the bat up on the billboards. Same place. We're going to be telling you more about them, getting to know the docs at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute in Owings Mills. World-class care right where you are, and Cal looks good up on the billboards as well. One more, Patrick's in Essex. It's my old stomping grounds. I had some French fries and gravy down there. It was fantastic last week. I'm getting in. I wasn't like super hungry, so I didn't want to order everything, but I'm going back next week starving. Monday, they do tacos there. Tuesday, shrimp. Wednesday, the wings and the steak dinner. $11.99 on Thursday night. It's at Patrick's in Essex. There's never a cover. Food, music, classic rock. They got music on the weekends. Make sure you stop down. Tell Brett and the folks that we said hello at Patrick's in Essex. All right, Luke, let's get on to Joe Flacco here because there'll be plenty of time to talk more about Tucker. Certainly we're going to talk more about Jimmy Smith and where he is on a health standpoint. But Flacco in the offense and, look, running the ball. Let's start with that because it doesn't exist. We're halfway through the year now. I don't know what to say about the running game other than, it's not bad, it's not good, it's not awful, it's not given a chance to be awful, it's not given a chance to be good either, to some degree. But Flacco did enough to sort of win the game in the end and would have been given another opportunity. It was a weird game. I know you tweeted that a couple of times on Sunday, man. It was just a weird game.
Yeah, I thought he played okay. I thought he was solid. I think he certainly made some good throws, but I also think he left some on the field. And, I go back to the drive where Hayden Hurst was wide open and he underthrew him, and Hurst probably still should have caught it, but
I didn't think he was particularly crisp. I thought first half was better than the second half.
Yeah,
for sure,
yeah.
right?
He made some really good throws. The touchdown pass to Mark Andrews I thought was a really good throw. Certainly in the 2-minute situation, when you see what the Ravens were able to do, even though they got the face mask penalty to kind of get them going with just over 2 minutes to go, but made some big plays. So it wasn't. And this is where I keep going back to this just being a weird game because I feel like every phase did something good and in some cases played really well for large stretches of the game and then left me wanting more. And I keep coming back to that fourth quarter. Kamara scores a touchdown, makes it 17-14, and then the Ravens go 3 and out. You could just feel it shift at that point, really after the 3rd and 8 play with Breeze to Michael Thomas when Jefferson had Breeze wrapped up. But from the point that New Orleans scored early in the 4th quarter, makes it a 3-point game, that's when you kind of get that feeling that, okay, even though this has been a little bit more of a defensive struggle than you expect when you're playing the Saints and the Ravens had held them down, at that point, that's when you kind of need to know as an offense, we need to get in gear at this point because we've been here before, maybe not against a Drew Brees, but a Ben Roethlisberger, a Tom Brady, Peyton Manning back in the day. You know at that point that it can morph into a shootout very quickly, and you need to be able to answer. Instead, they went 3 and out, after a long drive, so the defense was kind of winded. They come back, defense gives up a touchdown, another long drive, and then they moved the ball, even though they got a couple pass interference penalties on that drive, but they couldn't convert on 4th down. So I keep going back to those 2 drives, and everything that the offense did before that and after, on that final drive where they scored and Tucker couldn't tie the game on the extra point, but I would have liked to have seen more than 23 points against this Saints defense playing in your home building. If you're down in the Superdome, you're playing on the road, tough atmosphere, all right, I can live with that, but I think you needed to up more from your offense than the Ravens provided on Sunday. And you mentioned the running game. I'm with you, and one of the things that I point to, the fact that the Ravens had 8 different players carry the ball on Sunday, doesn't that kind of tell you everything you need to know about where they are with their running game right now? I mean, who would you say is their best runner right now? It's probably Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's been best in terms of yards per carry, through the first 7 games of the season. I mean, he's been pretty decent in that regard compared to some of these other guys. But
and by the way, I didn't think the O-line struggled a lot. I thought Joe showed some elusiveness and kept some plays alive a little bit. But early in the game, receivers were open, man. It felt easy. It felt like pitch and catch early in the game. And even when, Snead's running across the middle and drops it, you feel like somebody's going to come back and sort of pick him up at that point. There were some open runners. There were some opportunities in the passing game that, I would say made it attractive to throw the football early in the game. But then you get the lead and you're sort of you want to shorten the game. You want to keep the ball out of Breeze's hand. The best way to do that is to be able to run the football. And I know the O-line had some changes, and obviously Hurst and Lewis not being in there. But I thought Zeus did a nice job. And, certainly not the deep depth. I mean, they were one heartbeat away from having Nick Boyle play tackle, right, or guard.
Yeah, I mean, they just can't run the football effectively. I mean, they do it a little bit here and there. I think, last week we saw with a lead, they were able to have a functional running game to chew the clock, but they were never in that mode on Sunday where you were just going to shut it down, or they shouldn't have been anyway. 10-point lead against New Orleans, we saw how quickly that disappeared. But it's tough right now. With the injuries especially, that didn't help in terms of trying to really get your running game on track. I really think they're going to have to lean on their passing game, and that's worked at times this year, and at other times it hasn't worked quite as well. And certainly the Cleveland game comes to mind, and portions of Sunday's game. Again, I don't want to make it out to be that the offense was horrible, but going into this one, if you had told me New Orleans scores 24 points, I like the Ravens' chances of scoring 27 or 30 or 31. I just felt that this is the kind of matchup they should have been able to exploit. And you saw in the first half, I mean, Marshawn Lattimore was able to shut down Crabtree, but, then you go to John Brown, you go to Willie Snead, you go to your tight ends, you go to running backs out of the backfield. I mean, I think Lattimore is certainly a proven player in his second year after being Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, that you don't want to test him too much. And, that's fine, even though they did throw his way a little bit as the game went on.
The game was about the secondary, and the game was about flags and hand checking and getting, either getting away with it or getting called for it. But, there there was a lot of that going on in the secondary where the Zebras were involved. And I know Flacco threw the little red flag early in the game, too.
Yeah. I mean, there were calls. I thought a couple of them were questionable. I thought some of the other ones were legitimate. I know some people took exception to the one call on Jimmy Smith down the sideline with, yes, it was Michael Thomas. Well, he was also holding his arm. So if you've ever played wide receiver, someone's holding your arm, it's difficult to catch the ball. Imagine that. But there was some of that. But I also think the Ravens, especially later on in the game, they were the benefactor of a call or two. So there was some of that. There's no doubt. And certainly secondary play, I think, was pivotal in a number of ways. And I mentioned that Jimmy Smith struggled as much as he did. And one point about that I wanted to make with him specifically, so much attention had been made or given to his suspension, and understandably so. I understand that. But let's also remember, this guy's coming off of an Achilles injury in December, and he's 30 years old. It's not to say he won't make it all the way back, but I don't think it's unreasonable to wonder if that he's still working his way back from that to be at the top of his game. And will he get back to the pre-injury form that he enjoyed the last couple of years? I don't know, but certainly not his best effort. And like Justin Tucker, Jimmy Smith also answered questions after the game and said, hey, I kind of feel like we were the reason why we lost. I didn't play very well. I kind of feel like I let my defensive teammates down. And you like hearing that accountability. I mean, you like it more when guys play better and you don't have to hear that kind of stuff. And Justin Tucker's not missing a kick, and Jimmy Smith isn't committing penalties and giving up big plays in the passing game. But the accountability is something that you like. And I'll say this: even though there was definitely a sense of shock because of the way that Sunday's game ended, I do think Ravens players said the right things. And again, they need to go out and show it. They need to go back to the drawing board, get better in some of the areas they need to get better, and be ready to play at Carolina on Sunday, because this is an important game and you don't want to drop two straight, and then you're looking at the bye week looming and not wanting to be in that territory where you're looking ahead to the rest of the schedule and saying, wow, we're going to have to win 5 out of 7. We're going to have to win 6 out of 7. You don't want to be in that territory, so you can do something about it the next couple weeks, and that's win and still have yourself in a pretty good spot once you get into that Week 10 bye.
He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. Luke Jones will be out in Owings Mills all week. I will be in Charlotte this weekend for Ravens activity, and we'll be talking about the missed kick and the Saints and Drew Brees with a number of folks here all week long. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Modell Lyric. Got to give them some love. I am going to be talking to Ronnie Platt from Kansas coming up here. We got a Charlie Brown Christmas coming up, Sesame Street Live coming up next month. If you want to take the kids to the Modell Lyric, they got comedy coming up with Jim Gaffigan on February the 8th, but the classic rock that I love so much. Kansas, John Mellencamp in February, Joe Bonamassa in March, Straight No Chaser end of November, right around Thanksgiving, as well as the Beach Boys Christmas. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric. My man Sidney's doing the magic of romance and love. Charles Newsonoff and Son since 1923. True love comes in all shapes and sizes, and Sidney is doing 50% off this week only, out at Charles Newsonoff and Sons, right off 695. Find them in Parkville or find them at charlesnewsonoff.com. Also, our friends at the Lee Tessier team. Selling my condo. They are Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks that I'm trusting with my real estate transactions, you can trust them as well. You can always learn more at leetessier.com. Leave it up to them. They locate the finest properties, and you just leave it to them, and they negotiate the deal for you. You get on with what you're doing while they take care of the business of buying and selling homes, which is what they do for you. LeeTessier.com, the way to do that. Last thing for you, Luke, before we sort of break it all down and go through the week and do all that stuff. The offensive line and the injuries, some thoughts about deep depth and where they are and where they go, because they can't stay as healthy as they really have been over the first 6 weeks. These things are going to start creeping up a little bit. And there was a little bit of a shock to how this injury report thing sort of took a turn at the end of the week, right?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think everyone expected Alex Lewis to miss the game. There was nothing shocking about that. I mean, it was great to hear that all of his neurological testing and everything was good, and CT scan, all those different things. Had basically what John Harbaugh has described as a pinched nerve, but he was still sore, didn't practice all week. He was ruled out Friday, so that wasn't a surprise. I think the Ravens would have been covered there just fine with putting Orlando Brown Jr. at right tackle. You shift James Hurst to left guard, which I think he's better suited for that position anyway compared to right tackle. But then late in the week, Marlon Humphrey on the defensive side of the ball has the thigh issue. He ends up not playing. We've already talked about Jimmy Smith's struggles there. But on the offensive line, Saturday, James Hurst added to the injury report with a back issue. And what I was surprised by, and this is what makes me wonder if he took a turn for the worse, because they did not add an offensive lineman from the practice squad. I mean, they have Nico Saragusa, Jermaine Illuminor, and Randon Crecilius, two of them former draft picks from a year ago who have been in this system for 2 years now. And Crecilius was with them throughout the spring and summer. So it's not as though he's not familiar with what they did. So with James Hurst ultimately not playing on Sunday, the Ravens had one reserve offensive lineman, which I think is kind of crazy to only go into a game with one reserve offensive lineman. So my assumption, and perhaps we'll get some clarity from John Harbaugh over the next couple of days as we get a little bit further away from Sunday's loss, is they expected Hurst to play, and maybe he woke up and his back was worse than it was the previous day, because otherwise I don't get that, and it really doesn't speak too well for, as you kind of talk about the depth, if you didn't expect him to play and you didn't think it was worth it to bring one of those guys up from the practice squad, it probably isn't the best endorsement of those individuals on the practice squad. So, I think, we've talked about this a little bit as far as the overall play of the offensive line. I think Alex Lewis has not quite regained his form from a couple years ago, and keep in mind this kid's missed a lot of football over the last couple years. So I think some patience is needed there. But not having him and then not having James Hurst, that offensive line, and Harbaugh said it, and I tend to agree. We'll all have a chance to go back and rewatch the game. Those of us that like to watch film and look at the PFF grades and all that different type of stuff. But I think overall the offensive line held up about as reasonably well as you could expect, given that you had two rookies, and one of those rookies was a sixth-round pick.
Well, as you would say, graded out okay. Flacco didn't get killed. Let's, really.
Yeah. But at the same time, and this is something that we haven't talked about too much, but it's been true throughout the season, even with their normal starting five in there. What concessions are you having to make in terms of using max protect, in terms of keeping tight ends in the block, in terms of what you're doing with the running game? Those are things that don't show up in a box score, but if you need to keep your tight end in to block Cam Jordan, as we saw Nick Boyle a couple times was the one blocking Jordan, which was surprising and probably not the ideal matchup. But how much of that stuff are you having to do, and then what impact does that have on the rest of your offense? What impact does that have on your passing game if you only have three guys out on a route rather than four, or only two guys out on a route rather than three or four? So, I think there are some hidden costs there that we don't necessarily talk about that do hurt this offense. But, it's something that is concerning because, and we talked about this in the offseason, I'm fine with the Ravens not paying Ryan Jensen what he got from Tampa Bay. I want to be very clear about that. But you had to replace him. And, I think Matt Skura's held up and done about what you would have expected, but that still doesn't mean that it's been stellar. And, right tackle, I think I'd like to see Orlando Brown Jr. get some more opportunities. I think he held up pretty well, all things being considered. But again, there's one thing of just holding up and surviving, and there's another thing of playing at a level where you're going to thrive, and that's where you ask about the running game. That's where you ask about what you're having to do to keep Joe Flacco upright and what impact that might have in routes and how many guys you have running patterns.
Well, putting yourself in a position where you don't have to make an extra point to force overtime, right?
Yeah,
because if the offense is firing all pistons, you win the game.
Right. So I mean, I don't think by no means do I think it's a crisis, but you need to get healthy. You need to get Alex Lewis back. You need to get James Hurst back. And if you like how Orlando Brown played at right tackle, then you've got a decision you can make there. You have some options there, and that's a good thing. You'd like to have some options to the point where you're not just surviving and hoping that someone doesn't get hurt and you have to put Nick Boyle at right tackle. You'd like to be in a position where you have to make some tough decisions, and that's what the Ravens have on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, until Humphrey, the injury with him this Sunday, they've had so much depth at every level that you're able to scratch Tyus Bowser like the Ravens did last week, or not have Patrick Ricard active last week. They've been able to make tough decisions like that on the defensive side of the ball because of the depth, and I'll also remind everyone, because of all the resources they spent on that side of the ball the last 3 or 4 years. The offense, you don't have that depth on the offensive line, and especially Bradley Bozeman, who really tried to push his way through a calf injury for a big portion of Sunday's game. You're holding your breath that you don't have to put a tight end at offensive tackle. So they need to get healthier there, and they need to continue to try to figure out ways to get a more consistent running game. And they had a couple decent runs here and there. The numbers weren't god-awful, but they certainly weren't great. And you look at their yards per carry, where it ranks in the NFL, and look at that, and they're averaging 3.4 yards per carry on the season. That's not good enough. You need to at least be closer to 4 yards a carry as a rushing offense. Otherwise, you're just putting a lot of pressure on your quarterback, putting a lot of pressure on your passing game, and you're putting, if they're not going to run block, the Ravens have been able to pass protect pretty well, but they're still putting a lot of pressure on those guys in that regard. You need to be balanced. They need to figure this out. They need to scheme it up. They need to get players healthy. They need guys to block better. They need the running backs to see running lanes better. And in the passing game, they need to be a little sharper than they were on Sunday. They made some plays, but there were definitely some plays out there left on the field, some drops, some underthrown balls, frankly, a couple balls that could have been intercepted that Joe Flacco was pretty fortunate on, and a couple more batted passes, and that's been an issue too. So I think the good news is the offense to this point in the season, if we're looking through 7 games, I think you feel good about it. It's certainly way better than it's been the last few years, but there's still some things that they need to get better with if they want to find that consistency. It's great to go win a game at Pittsburgh, but how much is it worth when you stub your toe at Cleveland the following week? It's great to have 11 sacks and embarrass the Tennessee Titans, but you come home and you lose a tough one against a good football team in your own stadium. I don't want to say it necessarily cancels it out, but you're really not allowing yourself to build momentum and get on a roll and get to that territory where you're 6-2, 7-2, 8-3, and in order to do that, you got to win some games. You got to stack some wins, and John Harbaugh's talked about that, and that's something, frankly, the Ravens haven't been good enough to do the last couple of years. So that's where you walk away from Sunday and just say that was a missed opportunity, because I think it was sitting right there. They had a 10-point lead early in the fourth quarter, and they couldn't stop Drew Brees anymore, and their offense wasn't able to step up enough on the opposite side of the ball, and then you can never count on or plan for Justin Tucker to miss an extra point. But as you said, it shouldn't have come down to that. There were plays to be made that the Ravens could have been in a position where they had the lead at the end there, or maybe it was tied and they were driving for the winning score. They had some opportunities and they weren't able to take advantage, and that's what is disappointing, because I think they played a really good team on Sunday, and they had a really good opportunity to beat them.
Luke, I am on to Charlotte. We're going to continue on with Luke Jones. Coach Billick's going to join us, amongst many others. All of our WNST coverage can be found in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear. The morning newspaper ships to you digitally every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness. That's $5 down, $10 a month, and there is a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Also, the Maryland Job Hockey Club, who hosted us for the Maryland Million on Saturday. Had a great time down at the sportsbook there. Check the pictures out on our social media. Also, check out the entries in the front of WNST.net, as well as in our morning newspaper. Any breaking news, you get it first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.